Welcome to Girl Dad Nation. In this episode, I welcome Lonnie Anderson. He's a creative director that has worked with Spike Lee, Mark Ruffalo, George R.R. Martin, street artist Shepard Fairey, and many more. He also has a short film recently released called Love in the Valley, and he's been known as the king of Valentines Day because he makes amazing Valentines every year for his wife. He's got 2 teenage daughters and overall just a great guy. Let's get to it. Lonnie, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me on. I'm honored to be the first.
Yeah, you are my first guest. So my idea is to have a bunch of creative people like yourself and different dads in a variety of different fields come on and share their experience. The ups and downs of being a dad, and specifically a dad of girls. So you have 2 daughters.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So I have 2 daughters, Hawthorne and Cheyenne. I really thought I was going to be the dad of sons, and I even my second daughter, I only had boys' names because we didn't find out what the gender was. So I only had boys' names. So my second daughter went a whole month because she was born in our house in New Mexico. And so she went a whole month without having a name. Her sister named her Cherry Blossom. So we called her Cherry Blossom for
That's awesome.
a month. And then we decided on Cheyenne. Yeah, it's different. I'm so happy I have daughters. I mean, I have to tell you that's the thing. Like I thought about me as a kid being a boy, and I grew up in a kind of a foster home, so I had several brothers and several sisters, and the boys, man, we were very naughty kids. So I feel very lucky. My daughter's been doing her homework since she was in 2nd grade. She just takes it and does her homework.
Is it harder now raising teenagers? Because I've got 2 girls, but my oldest is just a little bit over 2 years old. And then we have a 2-month-old. So I hear teenagers can be a bit of a handful.
Yeah. So, I think it's just part of the whole learning. And I'll give you a story. Like, so I remember the day it happened. I have a truck, an old truck, and I would just have the door open and the girls would just jump in my truck, and they didn't even care where we were going or what we were doing. And we would just drive away. And I remember the day that my daughter came out she was emptying the garbage, and I opened up the truck door and she just walked by me, and they were like, "No, I'm going to stay here." And I remember that. I remember. And so yeah, it changes in the sense that they just become more independent. And again, I think you have to remember as a dad is like, that's what you raised them to do. Like you're raising them to be independent and to go out into the world and do those amazing things. And, another thing I remembered when, my daughter was a baby, and I would put up my hand and she would put up her hand, and I would turn my head, or I would laugh and she would laugh. Mm-hmm. And then I remember the one day when I turned my head this way and she turned her head that way. And it was the thing where she did not copy me. And I thought, and it scared me and startled me for a minute, because I was like, oh my God, there's somebody in there, because as a dad, you just think, you're just, I don't know, you don't. And then from that, you just learn. And I don't think it's harder. Like, I think it's just different. You just, you have to be able to listen more and be patient more and understand like what they're going through. I don't know if you probably, if you remember being 13 to 17, 12, I mean, I was a very angry kid. I was being raised outside of my, biological family, and I was very angry. And so I can't even imagine being like I must have been extremely angry. I remember my parents and the adults, they didn't have any time to be compassionate or with that. They were just like, they basically were like, you do what I say or else you're going to, be in trouble. And I'll tell you what, being raised in fear and violence, sometimes it just doesn't work. And so with my daughters, it's very much like, I listen to them and I say I'm sorry a lot, which is really hard for me as a dad, to say you're
I think
sorry.
that's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah. And so, but it's wonderful. Like, I always tell people, when they're going to be a new parents or whatever, and I say, like, everything that you thought was the most important in your life just automatically becomes not important. Like it changes, and then my other advice was like, if you're not terrified every single day, then you're just not doing it right, and I'm not saying like you have to be so anxious that you're having panic attacks, not like that, but yeah, you should be a little afraid, like, am I doing it right? Like, am I feeding this kid right? Am I like, am I, are you helping him enough at preschool? Are you not helping him enough? Should they be learning how to drive right now at 14 or 15? I was driving when I was 12 in Wyoming. And so it's like all those questions,
Yeah, well, I know when I first became a dad, it was like everything was new. And I was like, do we give them water or do they just drink milk? And like, when do we do just like regular milk? And then once my daughter was able to walk and then she was putting everything in her mouth at that point. But it was like, okay, well, what things can we feed her now? And like, can she have French fries, even though she's pointing to my French fries and all those things? But it was so cool just to see like her grow, and particularly around food. A lot of women struggle with food and body image and all that kind of stuff. And it was something that it just didn't really affect me. It's something I didn't think about like as a guy, but I know it affects a lot of women. And once we knew we were having daughters, that was something that my wife and I talked a lot about, was how are we going to address that? And it was something that we decided that, particularly around food, we wanted to give her like as much freedom, like to try different foods. And also, I know just growing up, my wife and I, there were certain foods that we just didn't eat because our parents didn't like them. And so, yeah, once we got older and we started trying different things, we really like sushi. And that's something that I didn't have. Part of it was just like, we didn't have as much money growing up to like, go out for sushi and stuff. But that's kind of become like a treat for us when we celebrate, we go out for sushi and we try different things. And even our daughter now, we give her, like, even if she wants to try it, we try not to say you won't like it. We try to just let her experience it first and know that it's like a safe place for her to do so, and not give her anything that would hurt her. But she gets to try different things, different spicy foods and stuff. And just to see their reaction is kind of funny too, when they try something that's spicy and they are learning all of those things. But it's amazing that it's all new.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that, talk about food. That's exactly right. Like, I think I was the same way as a dad. Because again, genetically, I'm just skinny and I can eat anything. And I was just terrified that, my daughters, might have eating disorders. I mean, it's just like, that's only like the million thing you worry about, you're just, And so, the great thing it's like available to us that probably wasn't available to our parents was the whole idea that, you can read books now, and you can, there's all these tips on, and there's way too many tips to remember, but, every once in a while, if you use one or two or try to figure it out. I mean, even with my daughters, like, food is a big deal for all of us. We've traveled all over the world. I mean, my daughters have lived in Shanghai. They've lived in Dubai. They backpacked through Europe when my first daughter was like 2 and my other daughter was like 5. Like we literally started in Ireland, and then I was teaching in Venice, and we went to Venice, and then we went and saw some relatives in Bosnia and in Croatia and Slovenia, and so all those different kinds of foods, staying with our relatives in the mountains in the Julian Alps was just like, this crazy experience for these kids, because they just didn't, they didn't even have a refrigerator there. Like, so my auntie didn't have a refrigerator, so it was like these kids were like, where's the fridge,
Mm-hmm.
and then all the food that they've tried, one of my daughters, all she would eat in China is duck eggs, because she just loved it.
Okay.
And again, with chicken noodle soup in China, she ordered that because she thought it was going to be chicken noodle soup. But when it came, they literally have the feet sticking out of the chicken noodle soup. So there's feet are there. And then so she didn't eat that. And then when we were in the Middle East, the kids just tried everything, and I have one daughter who was born in Brooklyn. And then I have one daughter who was born in the South Valley in Albuquerque. And so even there, just where they were born and raised, just their palates are different, and all of that with kids. And like you said, like you just start out and you're just like, can I give this kid water, or like, are they only supposed to have formula? And like, thank God, like my wife, like she knew, like all these things. But I mean, even when we were in China, it was like, I was telling Cheyenne, like, she was small. She was probably like 5 or 6. And I'd say, don't lick anything. Don't, cause they put their mouths on everything. And I'm telling you, like, she licked everything in China. Like she was licking the bus things. I turned around, she's licking the seat. She was like, cause she's still a little kid. She was like a baby. She might even only been like 2 or 3. And so it was like, it's like, yeah, all that stuff with the food of trying to be a good dad and trying to, be understanding. And then even now when they're older, of both of my daughters they probably know more about food and more about those things than I would ever know. Like, they eat organic. They're very aware of their footprint. My daughter's always like, I'm not allowed to buy anything with plastic. I'm not allowed. And I think like that's another part of the dad thing is like, I think you get too caught up in the sense that you're the person who's supposed to be teaching these kids, everything. And the thing I've learned is like, look, we taught each other. We've taught each other through of growing up. Like they teach me and I teach them. And now that I'm older and they're older, I have to tell you, I'm not sure if I'm teaching them anything. I think I am like completely the student. I am the person who's like, listening, because, both of my daughters are just like, you were talking about, like being the dad of girls. Okay. So this is a great thing I had to learn, because my daughters are very progressive, and so they would bring friends home, and I'd say, hey, how are you girls doing? And I got corrected, like, well, some of they have pronouns like them and they, and all these different gender issues, different gender things. And for me, I didn't know anything like that, so I really had to be very conscious, when their friends came over, to say they, how are they doing, and how are the, and it's like one of those things, like, even if you don't know it or you don't understand it or you don't, I guess there's probably dads out there who don't, are just not, they're not gonna ever maybe understand it. And even then, I think it's just like important, because if it's something that your kids think is important and you want to have a relationship with them, like then you better make it important. And that's the thing, like I think I've learned the most is so I've and saying girls is another thing. Like I say women, or young woman, now that they're older, I don't really use the word girls. And some people, I can hear them, they're saying like, oh, you're being too, what is it, politically correct, or da 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 da. And I always say, like, I want to be friends with my daughters for the rest of their lives. So if they're trying to teach me something, then as a dad, and that's not just been now as they're teenagers, it's been since they were little kids, if they needed something, they wanted to tell me something, or if they wanted to, share something with me, really, you have to pay attention. Like, that's the thing about being a dad. It just goes so fast, and you just really have to pay attention.
Yeah, well, I think too, like, people kind of get caught up on the politically correctness of stuff like that. But I think more so, whether you have a strong belief one way or the other, just having compassion. I think like you learn so much compassion and empathy when you have a little human that like relies on you for everything, and they want to just experience the world with you and tell you things. And it's awesome too, because sometimes just the way that my daughter approaches life gives me a new appreciation for the little things like that. We actually just got a zoo membership this past year. So yeah, even though with all the pandemic and all that craziness, we haven't seen too many people, but we were able to just go to the zoo and just to see just different creation and animals and stuff, like through her eyes, and just share those things. Like it's pretty amazing how fascinated she is by just nature and life and animals. And it gives me a new appreciation for just how amazing those things are.
I think like that sustained me as a dad. Like that's the thing that's like been the most eye-opening and the most like wondrous part of it, is just what you said, like being there. I remember we were in Jordan and we went to Petra, and my daughters, I'm from Wyoming originally, so I was raised on horses. So my daughters ride horses all the time. They've been riding horses since they're awesome. Probably like 1 year old. And so we were at the bottom of Petra, and they had these horses, and the kids could, anybody could ride these horses back up to the trail, to the buses. And yeah, Cheyenne was like, I want to ride one of the horses. And I was like, okay, are you okay riding it? And, in another country, like, it's not like it is here. Like, they don't like say, okay, here, sign this waiver. And, do you, it's just like, they just hand you the horse. And these were wild horses. They weren't like, tame horses. They were like pretty, and man, I just watched my daughter do everything that I had taught her, and, get on the horse and then trot away, ride up in another country, on a wild horse, and just and do everything that I had taught her how to do. She made sure the cinch was done and the bridle was okay, and she rode the horse up. Rode it up to the top of the canyon, and then we met her up there, and I was just like, wow, I couldn't. It's just one of those things. And even the guy, he laughed. The Jordanian guy, he was like, how does she know how to ride a horse like that? And I think like just being able to pay attention to those things and see your kids, experience those things for the first time, or see those things, or see the independence. The other one was riding a camel, and the guy, I don't know if with a camel, like it's not like they have a bridle for a camel. It's like this huge chain that they put on the camel that they use to steer, because it's a big animal. And I saw my daughter like riding this camel, leading this other camel, like all by herself down the middle of this trail.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I was just like, what the, like, this is crazy, But again, at the zoo, is where she had learned how to ride a camel. Like we have a zoo here in Albuquerque and in Brooklyn, and they had both ridden camels in the zoo. The camel guy, drove them around. So they got on this camel in a country where they really do ride camels, or it's a form of transportation. And again, as a dad, you're like, wow, like for me, it's even more amazing because I was a baby. I was abandoned at an orphanage. My parents, Native American and white, and my dad was white, and their families didn't get along. It was a biracial family, and they just didn't think that they could raise me in a really. My dad had just come back from Vietnam. He'd been in Vietnam for 2 tours, and he wasn't okay with the war, and so I was put up for adoption. And again, I wasn't in the orphanage for very long, but I was adopted, and then I was raised in like a foster home. So there was a lot of kids coming in and out of the house. And so, and again, it was, I'd be very honest, my dad was a very violent guy. I saw a gunfight when I was 6 years old. These guys had beat him up, and he had tried to shoot this man right in front of us. I was standing right next to him, and he was shooting at this man. Wow. And I laugh because it's not funny, but I laugh because it's like, it just makes me, nervous to even talk about. But he beat my mom. And so I saw a lot of violence as a kid. And I think even for me to experience as being a dad, like I'm an extra good dad, I think that's like, notice, like I put notes in my kids' lunches since they were in preschool. And it's always been a drawing. I draw something, cartoon character, everywhere from Hanna-Barbera. I do all the old 80s and 70s stuff that I do. So they don't know who Jabberjaws is, or, Hong Kong Phooey, or any of these, characters are Daffy Duck. But I've always drawn them, and then I put be brave and be kind. And that's all I put on the note. And I have thousands of them, and in birthday parties as well. Like we go crazy. Like even like these things, these are all made. They're not like, we didn't go buy them. Like this is
it's not an Amazon order.
This is just a white marker on a tablecloth from the dollar store, and these are 2 bowls from the dollar store with a red marker. And these are 2 bowls put together and then saran wrap around it, and just paper. And we make everything. Like we've made for birthday parties. We've done, my daughters wanted the Eiffel Tower. I remember like she wanted like a Paris themed birthday party. So I built this huge, like 25-foot out of refrigerator boxes Eiffel Tower in our front yard.
That is awesome.
And it was gigantic. We built castles, and we built under the sea things. We put the magic tree house. We built the wild things, where we cut out huge, like 9 feet of all the monsters from the wild things. And that was one of the parties. And so
my daughter and I read the Wild Things.
The
Wild Things are. Like, she loves that book.
It's just important to like remember, like even this, like I say, it's a little more important than your career. And I know that's really hard for people to get behind, because you're told when you're a kid, like, that's it. But I always remembered, again, being a kid, that wasn't raised traditionally by his parents, is that, the people that your family is the person who's going to be there for you. Your job, you're going to have tons of jobs, but those jobs when you're old are never going to drive you to the store. Those jobs are never going to, if you have to go to the bathroom, they're not going to help you go to the bathroom. It's your family. And I think it's really hard to think like that, because you've invested so much into your career, and your kids are so vital in that. You want them to go to the best college. You want them to you want all these things for them. So when you make all this stuff and you invest all this stuff in this time, I'm out there at 10 o'clock at night trying to figure out how to hook my daughter's hoverboard underneath her land speeder, because that's what she wants. She wants to be able to stand on the land speeder, so it looks like it's floating across.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out how to tape that in there and how to like use, you know, things to make it work. It's just worth it. It's like the next day, you know, just see her standing on it, and she just zoomed across the floor, and it looked like she was like floating. The land speeder looked like it was floating, and the other kids were cheering for her, you know. Like, that's the dad stuff. I mean, man,
yeah, that's amazing. And from my perspective here, like all of those candies look like, it looks like you've got like a virtual background. Like you just blew up they look so photorealistic from my perspective.
You know, you look at them, like, that's the thing. I think even with fatherhood, it's one of those things, like you look at fatherhood from a distance and you're like, wow, that's amazing. You know, like that must be, but then when you get closer, you know, you get to see like, oh, it's messy, you know, like those letters aren't straight, and he spelled chocolate wrong, and you know, like that's tinfoil from you know, from and that's black tape from, you know, whatever. And again, I think like that's what's so beautiful about fatherhood, is just like, you know, you're the only one that gets to see the closeness and the messiness, and that's the most beautiful stuff. You know, like my daughter giving me lecturing me on pronouns was the most beautiful thing I ever, because I couldn't even imagine my dad ever talking to me about pronouns. No way. Or me talking to my dad about pronouns. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. Like, you know, and so when your kids do these things, you know, those details, like wow, again, that's the messiness. Like that from the distance, it looks really beautiful. But when you get up close to it, you notice like there are flaws. And I try to tell dads, like, you know, that's the good stuff. Like that's the stuff. That's the stuff that makes you sleep good and know that you're a good dad, and, you know, and see them doing the things that you're doing, you know, creating art. You know, I do these crazy Valentines for my wife. So every year, I've done everything from, oh my gosh, had people from around the world hold up signs that say, I love Anne, to have really famous poets read at a coffee shop, you know, Ruffalo and Joy Harjo, who's the National Poet Laureate, and Jimmy Santiago Baca, and Sherman Alexie, and all of these poets read for my wife. And so my daughters always watch that. I built a huge piñata. Like, this is actually the candy that fell out of 100-pound piñata that was held up by a crane. And so my daughters like watched me build that stuff. And I just noticed, like, one of my daughters put a package together for one of her friends, and it was like a Friends theme, like the TV show Friends, which I'm like, baffled. I'm baffled that these kids are watching Friends, but she like put so much intention and detail, and it was just way over the top. And then we went up to her friend and we gave it to her. And her friend, you know, her friend's struggling. She's got a single mom, and again, she's just, you know, she's a tough kid. And man, she gave her that present, and I'm telling you, I don't think that kid will remember that for the rest of her life, because it was just so beautiful. It was built with intention. It had all these little Friends things in it, with the Friend T-shirt and Friend candies and Friend, you know, whatever she could find, mug and stickers and all this stuff she ordered. And then the stuff that she loved, you know, she loved Pepsi and Doritos or something, but it was just done with so much intention. And I thought, wow, like, you know, as dads, we just really have to pay attention that they're watching everything we're doing. I mean, everything, good and bad. So you really, really have to pay attention, you know, to what you're doing, because they're sucking it up, you know?
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I think that's such a good point too. Like you mentioned, you get into up close and you see all the messiness and the imperfections. And I think sometimes like that's what we focus on is like, oh well, I didn't do this perfect, or my wife or my daughters like expect me to be perfect. But it's all like that intentionality behind it. It's those moments where you put all that love like specifically for them, and it's that personal touch. It's something that you just can't buy. You bring so much of your own life into it, and it's those things that they remember. It's that creativity and that personal touch that they'll take away from it. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's so awesome.
And again, you might not know, they might not remember it until they're adults. Like that's the
Yeah,
thing. You know, look at how much stuff you remember and I remember. You know,
yeah,
I still am remembering. Like that's the crazy part of it. Like every once in a while, I'll read something or I'll see something and I'll remember. It'll flash me back. It's just like when you hear a song, you know, and it takes you back right
yeah,
to the minute. And I think, you know, childhood is like that. I think you can be, you know, can be an old guy like me and you're still like, oh wow, I remember an ice cream I had at Little America out in the middle of Wyoming. And the bad ones too, you know. I think, you know, I remember my mom and dad fighting a lot. You know, they
yeah,
fought. So I'm very conscious even when, you know, my wife and I yell, you know, like that's just the messiness stuff you're talking about. Like, yeah,
yeah,
all parents, I think most parents yell, you know, or they try not to,
yeah,
but I'm very conscious of that. Like I remember sitting at the top of the stairs, just listening to my parents be very mean to each other
yeah,
and saying, I don't want that to happen. And like my wife never got spanked. And so I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it when I met her.
yeah,
Like I asked her like 10 times, like, and she was like, no, like my parents didn't spank me. And she would say, you know, that's violence. And I would say, and when we were first dating, I would say, how can that be violence? You know, every kid gets
yeah,
spanked, you know, but then again, I started to change. And then when I had kids, it was like, well, no, we're not going to spank, you know,
yeah,
and I still have, you know, friends on Facebook who are like, you know, what's wrong with these kids is that they get spanked, you know, they don't get spanked. And it's like, I
yeah,
got spanked and look at me, I'm a good person. And I always see those people post that. And I think, man, you know what? You never got spanked. You know, like you might have thought you got spanked, but like I tell them, like, you know, I had to pick out things that I had to get spanked up. And if it wasn't hard enough or didn't give
yeah,
me a whooping enough, bad enough, then I got whipped harder. And I always thought, you know, it took me a long time to even figure it out. When I got to college, you know, I was like, wow, these kids, there's a lot of these kids who never got knocked out by their dad, you know? And then you think
yeah,
about it and you're like, what? Like,
yeah,
like that's crazy. That's crazy that my dad was that violent. But, you know, for me to be able to realize that and then know that's not normal and then change the way that I'm a parent of saying like no violence, no
yeah,
shame, none of that, to change completely, and then have a partner who, you know, again, that's the way they were raised. Like I always tell people, like, they're just people in the world you meet who are just filled with love. Like you just meet them and you're just like, how did they get? And I think a lot of it's natural. It's like they are just loving people. But I think another thing is like they had parents that really loved them and supported them. And my wife's one of those. I mean, she is just, I mean, even my friends who don't like me, they like her. You know, like your wife is awesome, you know. And like her friends love her. And it's like one of those things you're like, look at all the things I've done, you know. I'm
yeah,
Google me. I always say Google me, you know, and if you Google my wife, it would just come up wonderful, beautiful person who's, you know, and I think like that's the thing to remember is like as a parent, you know, surround yourself with those parents, you know, the loving parents, the creative parents, parents like you, like the way you light up when you talk about your daughter, it's like, you're like, oh, this happened, and it's like, man, that right there, oh, to have somebody as a friend who's like that. Again, it teaches you how to, again, you could have been like me, who have no idea on how to be a dad. And then, but you meet those people and they share their experiences.
Yeah.
And even just your facial expression of like the way you light up when you're talking about your family is wonderful. I mean, I'm telling you that makes great parents. You surround yourself with 10 people like you're going to be an amazing parent. Even if you were left in an orphanage and saw your first gunfight at 6 years old,
yeah,
if you surround yourself with beautiful, loving, amazing parents, you'll become a beautiful, amazing, loving parent.
well, that's awesome. I think just what you described, it's amazing. This just testimony of like what good parents can do to shape their children and to be loving, wonderful people. But also on the flip side of that, even if like in your experience coming from an orphanage or not the best family life at home, you also have an opportunity as a parent to change that, to write a lot of these things and make that experience for your kids better, what you hoped it would be. And so I think it gives people an opportunity to make the world what they want from it. And their kids are that opportunity, that chance. So you always have a chance to do something special for your family, to give your kids the experience that you hope for them and the life that you hope for them, and be the father that you hope like they would have. So I think that's so cool, just on both sides, like just the impact good fathers and good parents make for their kids.
Yeah. And your kids love you. Like, that's the thing. Like I you always see those parents out there and you're thinking, they're like smacking their kid in public or something. And you think, gosh, that's a terrible parent. But you know what? Your judgment is not that little. Their kids' judgment. Their kids' judgment is that person is the most amazing person on the world.
Yeah.
And that breaks my heart, sometimes, because I see parents who I don't exactly agree with the way they parent, but I do realize that the person that loves them, their kids, is that person is the most amazing superhero that they know. They make them feel, hopefully they make them not have fear. And I always use this story. As a kid, I have a foster brother, stepbrother, and when he was 5, his parents, my mom and this boy man that she was dating, they poured gasoline on my brother and they set him on fire. And they put him out again. They must have been, I don't know what they were doing, but he grew up with us, and he struggled his whole life. He was in an institution, and but even in his older life, I once saw him on Facebook, and he was with his father, this guy who had set him on fire, and he had written, I love you, Dad, wished him happy birthday. And it makes you remember, like, that's the thing. That's how powerful love is.
Yeah.
Love is so powerful that if someone set you on fire, destroyed my brother's life, probably, basically, because he just never was the same. But he still loves his dad. And I think that's important to remember as a father and as a parent, is that, you have to be very conscious of the things you're doing, like you can't use the excuse of like, well, that was the way I was raised. I hear that a lot with people who spank a lot, like, well, I was raised spanking and it worked great for me, and I'm going to use it. And, don't tell me how to parent. And I very much easily could have said, well, my daughters are going to get spanked and they're going to get shamed, because that's the way that I was taught to stay in line. And I had to like consciously really pay attention to my wife, to the people around me, like yourself, like surround yourself with these wonderful, beautiful people, and listen to them and question yourself. I have this quote above, I don't know, I can't remember where this is, in my office or somewhere, but it was like, think of yourself as your worst enemy, that it's you, that you're the problem, that you're the one that's the one. And I think, again, like, you have to do that. And I know it's really hard as a parent, especially because, like you said, like, you don't really, there's not a book. I remember my daughter was born in Brooklyn, and there was this hospital, in Long Island Hospital. And in the hospitals there, they have a guard. They have a guard with a gun, like, at the door. Yeah. And so we get Hawthorne, and I would put her in the little thing, and I'm walking down this long hallway, and there's this guy with his gun at the end of this hallway. And I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh my God, and then I walk past him, and he just smiles and laughs, have a good day. And then I was completely terrified because I was like, my God, are they just going to let me take this little baby out of this hospital? Yeah. Am I qualified to be a dad? I kept waiting for someone to run after me and say, excuse me, sir, wait a minute. Here's the book. You need this book. You're going to have to read this book. You're going to have to take these tests. You can't just walk out of here with a baby. And, again, that's the craziness of being a parent, is just when I walked out of there and we got in the car, I was like, wow, they're just going to let us take this baby home. And, it's like, you have to get a license to catch a fish. You have to get a license to drive a car. You have to have a license to fly a plane. You have to have a license to have a job, but they let anybody, be a parent. And I think that's the thing, I think as parents, we have to surround ourselves with amazing, caring human beings. And we have to question ourselves every day. I mean, really, are you doing the right thing? Are you being the best dad you can be? Are you listening? Are you learning your pronouns? Are you recycling? My daughters pull my yogurt containers out of the garbage, wash them, and they're like, what is this? Or if I'll accidentally buy a plastic, water bottle, and they're like, you don't buy plastic water bottles, So yeah, paying attention and not being so hard on yourself as well. I think that's another important thing is that you're learning. You have to tell yourself that because I think too many times as parents, they just tell us you have to teach, you're the teacher, you're the most responsible, you're the one, and I think I've been really aware that most of my parenting skills I've been the student, not the teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. I've learned so much every day. And I know there's more, there's so much more that I don't know, but I'm trying as well to find things that we can learn with our daughter. So just this summer, we started doing a compost in our backyard.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to learn. I went to the library. I got all the books. I just did the search compost and just literally checked out all of the books from the library that I could. And then, just practicing with my daughter, the different vegetables like banana peels and different things. And then she helps me put up the shredded newspaper in the bin and then put the little compost items in. So as much as I'm learning, I'm trying to pass that on to her, but I know pretty soon she's going to be teaching me a lot more than I had.
Yeah. And it just gets more beautiful and beautiful and beautiful. And then, pretty soon they're 17, I caught both my daughters, I was the first person, I had a midwife, had two midwives. Mm-hmm. We tried to do a home birth, but we were in New York for Hawthorne, so it was really hard to do a home birth there. So we ended up going to the hospital for there, but to a birthing room. But then I had my daughter here at my house in New Mexico in a swimming pool, And I caught both my daughters. And so I was the first,
Wow.
like, have them, they were in my hands, and I got to like go, oh,
Yeah.
and my daughter's 17, and she just texted me from San Francisco, Chinatown. She's on a road trip she left Phoenix and with her cousins, and then they're going all the way up to Seattle, and they're picking up a friend, and then they're coming back down. And I got a text from her, from Chinatown in front of a beautiful mural. And I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
Like that just seems like a blink, like I feel like I just had her in my hand. And that reminds me as well. It's like, when people were like, why are you building a castle in your front yard for for a birthday party for one day? Or one of my daughters wanted me to build this rainbow machine, and it was like giant. Like this giant machine, and it made rainbows. So it was like
Wow.
this huge silk would pull out of it and go across the lawn, and then these clouds would come out of it. And my friends were just like, how long did that take to make? It's like you forget, because a lot of times, like, they were helping me, and they were, they came out and painted, and I got to spend time with them. And even like when we traveled, like we were in another country, so they stayed close, and they asked lots of questions, like, and then they got to experience like crazy stuff. Like in China, one of my daughters she's Native American, but she has red hair, because in the Southwest, the Spanish, they colonized New Mexico. And so there's a lot of Spanish blood, and then there's a lot of Native blood, because there were only men who came here. And so they had women that were Native. And so you have this red hair in a lot of Native pueblos and reservations. And in order to get red hair, you have to have red hair on mom and dad's side. So my wife's Irish. So my daughter has this bright red hair and black eyes, like black Apache eyes. And when we were in China, people were stopping her. She was a little kid, and they were like taking pictures with her. And she was instant celebrity. Like, we were walking on the street for China in Shanghai, and like people were just like swarming around her and like taking pictures with her, and saying hi to her and practicing their English. And I was just thinking, like, God, what must that be as a child? Like, have like the experience of like having, all these people come up to you, and you're just special, instead of, I think in America, sometimes it's the complete opposite. If you're different, you're scared. People are afraid of you, and they're, they make fun of you, and there's some hatred, and there's a lot of just meanness and prejudice against people that are different. And it was so amazing for my daughter to experience her differentness, because again, she's this red-haired American, and we're the only ones walking through the crowd, and to have these people just be like, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful, and oh, where are you from? And treating her so kind, and can I please get a picture? And I was thinking, oh man, like, how is this an amazing lesson to teach kids about being this? Or, again, with a lot of stuff that's going on with the Black Lives Matter right now, how beautiful is this lesson? Like, instead of these people walking up to her and being afraid of her, they're like just embracing her, and welcoming her to their country. Not like, you're an immigrant, why are you here? It was like, no, it was like, oh my gosh, welcome. Like, please come to my house. Like, like, let me show you something. Let me, we're so happy you're here. And I think like that's the great thing my daughters actually got to experience was, even in the Middle East, they have an auntie who's Palestinian, and they got to hear from her, like, how she can't go back to Palestine, and she holds an Israeli and a Palestinian passport. And so, they get to like listen to the stories and hear firsthand of what's going on in the world. And again, I think those are the prejudice, those are the things that you can teach your kids, and they're easy lessons. Like I tell people, like, oh, they say, well, I can't travel like you do, and I can't like live in New York and LA. And I always tell people, like, look, like we have the tiniest house. If you could see our house, it's like literally 800 square feet. It's a 2-bedroom house. There's 4 of us that live in it, and we crunch in here. And it's because we spend our money on travel and on going to art museums and going to experiences and doing different things, rather than, those choices of like have a big TV or have a fancy car. I had an old truck, so it would break down. I would be driving the kids to school and it would break down, and we'd go off the side of the road. And I've been in cars with kids who, like, if the car breaks down, like they have a panic attack, because that just doesn't happen, like, what are we going to do? Oh my God, and my daughter's like, it's like, okay, pull over, like we'll call your mom, she'll pick us up, take you to school, but hop out of the cars, we got to push this. So me and the girls are pushing the car off the side of the road. But it's like one of those amazing parts of the community, like where we live in the South Valley. People then stop and they jump, they see these 2 little girls pushing this car, and so they jump out, and pretty soon it's like 10 huge guys pushing this car, helping these 2 little girls push this car, and it's community. And I think, those are the things that I think kids are kind of hidden from, like, okay, well, you're late to school because your car broke down, and that's okay. Like, it's not the end of the world. Like, you'll get by. But I think, like, a lot of times as parents, we hide that stuff, from them. We make sure that they don't see that we're out of money, or they don't see that we can't buy a new car, or there's a reason why we have a small house, or, there's a reason why I, for a long time wore only 1 pair of shoes, but you share that with them, and they understand it, and they appreciate it, and they know that that's the real world. And I always tell people, other parents live like that too, but sometimes they're just so ashamed that you don't see that, and it's like, look, we're not going to be ashamed. It's like, if we can't afford to go somewhere, then we won't go, and we'll talk about it, and we'll say why we can't do it, or whatever. Or if we can, we'll talk about it and say, hey, we got some extra money, and whatever. Or and try and, like that guilt thing you were talking about with the food, I think that works for everything. I think that works for food. It works for money. It works for, school. It works for homework, all of those things, and paying attention that, you don't use those to make kids feel guilty or make them feel ashamed, or, and just saying it's okay to be late. My dad used to let us stay home on Fridays sometime for school. I remember my mom being so upset about it. But my dad would say, we're going to go snowmobiling, or we're going to go hunting today, or we're going to go do something, chop wood. And I realized it wasn't the end of the world. And I feel like even today, I'm the only person at my work who like takes a day off and doesn't sit home terrified that I'm taking a day off of work. Like I feel, like people feel guilty. Like they're like, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to, like they have panic attacks that they can't even stay home and enjoy a day off. And I think like I've been so lucky because I'm like that. And now my kids are kind of like that, like there's their mom still like, you can't take a day off, but they see me and, I think that's the biggest hurdle of being a parent is keeping that anxiety away from your kids. That
Yeah.
anxiety is just, it is just the worst. It's giving these, especially in this pandemic right now, man, these poor kids. My heart goes out to them because, missing a whole year of school, and, I can't even imagine, we have all this knowledge and experience we're carrying with us. So we're okay. But these kids don't have that. This to them is the end of the world, literally, so.
Yeah, and that's that messiness again, just like you compare yourself to other people, like vacations other families are going on, nice things that they have, toys or cars or whatever, the house that your friend has that's nicer than yours, but your kids, like, they see things differently. And I think sometimes, again, we get caught up on that, and like those candies in the background, like they look amazing, and it's similar to, like, your kids see all the stuff that you're doing, and even if your car, is like 20 years old, they see it, like, because that's the car that you take them to all the things, and that's the car that they visit their grandparents in, and all that kind of stuff. And so we get caught up on all that kind of stuff, but it's humbling, really, like, to remember those things. Thank you for listening to part 1 of my interview with Lonnie Anderson. In part 2, we dive into social advocacy and the art of being a dad. If you like this podcast, please leave a 5-star review and share it with a friend. Until next time, go be a dad.